The flickering fluorescent light in the precinct's break room hummed a low, irritating B-flat, a sound Officer Ben Carter had come to associate with stale coffee and the grinding exhaustion of a graveyard shift. He was a good cop, solid, a little too by the book for the old guard, but respected. Tonight, though, he felt an unfamiliar, cold clench in his gut. "You look like you saw a ghost, Carter," Sergeant Val Reyes muttered, setting her untouched mug of coffee down. Val was a study in controlled chaos, sharp eyes, a coiled energy, and the only person Ben trusted on the force after 8 years. "Just the usual," Ben lied, scrubbing a hand over his tired face. The truth was, the radio was acting up again. Not the unit radio, but the precinct's primary dispatcher channel. For the past 3 shifts, when the room was quietest, he'd hear it, a low, distorted whisper woven through the static, too faint to make out, too clear to dismiss as white noise. "The usual is a domestic call and a couple of joyriders." "Nothing that scares a guy who volunteers for this shift," Val challenged, pointing at the clock reading 3:17 a.m. Just then, the main dispatch speaker crackled to life, loud and clear. "Dispatch to Unit 4 Charlie. Possible 10 to 57, abandoned vehicle, Highway 29 Access Road, near the old Oakhaven turnoff. Requesting visual confirmation." Unit 4 Charlie was Ben's cruiser. He grabbed his keys, the cold feeling intensifying. "Oakhaven? Isn't that area decommissioned?" "Since '98. Old logging road. Stay on 29, just peek in. Don't go exploring," Val warned, her tone serious. Ben nodded and headed out. The night air was thick and smelled of pine and damp earth. As he drove, the streetlights became sparse, then disappeared entirely, leaving the highway cloaked in a suffocating blackness only broken by his headlights. When he reached the designated coordinates, he found it. A vehicle, half submerged in the overgrown brush on the side of the narrow, forgotten access road. It was a late model, navy blue sedan, remarkably clean, as if someone had driven it straight off the lot and into the woods. The driver's side door was ajar, swinging slightly in the non-existent breeze. Ben parked and radioed in. "For Charlie to dispatch. I have the visual. Blue sedan, license plate confirmed. Looks like the occupant stepped out and walked. Door is open, keys still in the ignition. No signs of forced entry." He approached the car slowly, flashlight beam cutting a swathe through the darkness. The interior was spotless. A full gas tank receipt and a takeout menu were on the passenger seat. On the center console, nestled between the gearshift and a phone charging cable, was a single object, a child's brightly colored wooden top, spinning slowly, utterly silently. Ben froze. He was a veteran. He knew physics. Nothing could keep a toy like that spinning for this long without friction and air resistance stopping it. He leaned closer, his pulse hammering against his ribs. The spinning top cast tiny, frantic shadows on the dash. He reached out to stop it, but just before his fingers made contact, he heard it, not through his earpiece, but from the darkness of the open driver's door, as clear as a bell, a little girl's voice, singing a nursery rhyme. "Round and round the garden." The singing was chillingly close, but when Ben ripped his head up and swept his flashlight beam across the dark woods, there was nothing. The top, however, had stopped spinning. He backed away, hand instinctively going to the grip of his sidearm. He was about to bolt back to his car when the dispatch radio on his chest crackled, not with static, but with the voice he had been hearing in his dread-filled dreams. The low, distorted whisper. And this time, it wasn't noise. It was a single, chilling message, directed only at him. "Carter. Don't call us. We found you." Before he could process the impossible transmission, the blue sedan's lights flashed once, the alarm gave a quick, high-pitched chirp, and the door slammed shut with a heavy, final thud. Ben scrambled back, pointing his weapon at the now sealed car. He could hear something moving inside the sedan. Not a person. Something heavier. The passenger window began to lower, inch by slow inch, revealing not the face of a suspect, but the blank, staring reflection of a child spinning wooden top pressed directly against the glass. Ben sprinted the 10 feet back to his cruiser, adrenaline surging, his breath ragged in the cold air. He didn't look back until he was slamming his door shut and fumbling for his microphone. For Charlie to dispatch. Code 3, expedite. Requesting immediate backup at 29 Access Road, Oakhaven turnoff. I have movement inside the vehicle. Repeat, I have movement. His voice was too high, betraying the controlled fear clawing at his throat. He saw the cruiser's dashcam blinking red, recording everything. He glanced in his rearview mirror. The blue sedan sat silently in the gloom, its windows now completely fogged from the inside, obscuring whatever was moving behind the glass. Dispatch to 4 Charlie. Copy Code 3. Val's unit, 3 Alpha, is en route, ETA 5 minutes. For Charlie, confirm nature of movement? Occupant profile? Is the vehicle secured? Ben stared at the sedan. The fog was thickening, swirling in slow, unnatural patterns. He could no longer see the reflection of the top. For Charlie confirms vehicle is secured, doors locked. I can't confirm the profile, dispatch. The windows are opaque. But whatever it is, it's not trying to get out. It sounds heavy. Like something dragging. He cut the transmission abruptly. He didn't want to mention the whisper or the thud of the self-locking door until he had an explanation that sounded halfway sane. He clicked on the high beams, flooding the sedan with white light. That's when he noticed the scratches. Fresh, deep gouges marred the paintwork above the trunk, forming what looked like crude, oversized claw marks, dragging vertically down to the bumper. They hadn't been there 2 minutes ago. Just as the distant wail of Val's siren began to rise in the distance, new, louder sound erupted from inside the abandoned sedan, a rapid, rhythmic tapping against the driver's side window. Tap tap tap. Pause. Tap tap tap. Ben recognized the pattern. It was the same rhythm as the little girl's nursery rhyme he'd heard. He watched in horrified silence as the interior fog on the driver's window began to clear, slowly, in a small circular patch. The fog didn't lift, it seemed to be wiped away from the inside by something. Through the clearing circle, Ben saw an eye. Not a human eye. It was huge, glossy black, and utterly still, lacking any semblance of a pupil or iris. It didn't blink. It simply stared. And it was focused only on him. Val's Unit 3 Alpha screeched to a halt behind Ben, her spotlight bathing the entire scene. Ben! What the hell is going on? I saw your report. Val stopped mid-sentence. She was standing outside her cruiser, flashlight raised, focusing on the blue sedan. Val, look at the window, Ben whispered into his radio, his voice barely holding steady. Don't get close. Val approached cautiously, her hand resting on her holstered weapon. The black eye was gone. The window was opaque again. Carter, it's just a fogged-up car. You're shaking. What did you see? She demanded, clearly annoyed by the unnecessary Code 3. The window, Ben insisted, pointing. The window cleared. There was something, a face. No, an eye. And the car locked itself after I got here, Val. I heard the chirp. The keys were in the ignition when I approached. Val's flashlight swept over the cruiser. She noticed the new, vertical scratch marks on the trunk. Her skepticism wavered, replaced by a cautious professionalism. Okay. We're calling this a high-priority missing person, possibly an abduction. We don't touch the car. I'll get forensics and a tow truck, but first, let's process the scene for the driver. Did you see footprints? They spent the next half hour methodically sweeping the access road. No footprints. No sign of a struggle. Just the pristine, silent vehicle and the dark woods. As they were about to conclude their initial sweep, Val pointed her light at the dirt near the car's front tire. Ben, look. What is that? Ben knelt down. Embedded in the damp earth, where no heavy boot or tire should have been, were 6 tiny, distinct, almost unnaturally perfect indentations, arranged in a semicircle. They looked like small fingers, pressed deeply into the mud. Beneath the indentations, a single small, dark puddle had formed. Ben dipped a gloved finger into the puddle and brought it up to the light. It wasn't water. It was thick, viscous, and smelled faintly of brine and something else, something metallic, like old pennies. Val, Ben said, his voice flat with dawning terror. That's not mud. And those aren't handprints. He stood up, looking at the silent, fogged car one last time. He knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever had been moving inside the sedan hadn't been waiting for the driver. It had been waiting for the police. The sun had not yet risen when the scene became a hive of methodical activity. Forensics vans, plainclothes detectives, and a heavy-duty tow truck now occupied the desolate access road. Detective Lieutenant Amelia Vance, a cynical woman known for her surgical precision and impatience with spooky stuff, took charge immediately. Carter, Val. You two were first on the scene, Vance said, clipboard in hand, her eyes sharp. Explain the code 3, and explain these scratch marks. Ben started detailing the events, finding the car, the open door, the spinning top, and the keys in the ignition. He hesitated before mentioning the car locking itself and the movement inside, but Val, sensing his nervousness, stepped in. The vehicle locked itself, Lieutenant. We both heard the mechanism engage, Val stated firmly, backing Ben's core observation. And when the sun rises, you'll see deep gouges on the trunk that weren't there when we arrived. Vance gave Ben a look that said, I'll deal with you later. Forensics, open the vehicle. Carefully. We treat this as an active kidnapping or, potentially, a homicide. Forensics technician Marcus Cole used a slim tool to bypass the lock on the passenger door. The click echoed loudly in the morning stillness. Cole pulled the door open, and froze. Lieutenant, you need to see this, Cole called out, his voice tight. Vance, Ben, and Val clustered around the open door. The first thing that hit them was the smell, not blood, not decay, but an overwhelming, sickly sweet scent, like burnt sugar mixed with ozone. The car was empty. Absolutely, perfectly empty. Where did the fog go? Val muttered, scanning the interior. The windows were now crystal clear. The meticulous interior was preserved, just as Ben had first seen it, except for 2 things. First, the center console was now completely bare. The takeout menu, the gas receipt, and most chillingly, the little spinning top, were gone. Second, on the passenger seat, resting exactly where the gas receipt had been, was a photograph. It was an old, faded school picture of a smiling man in his late 20s. Vance picked it up with tweezers. Marcus cross-referenced this face with the registered owner of the sedan. Cole tapped away on his tablet. Lieutenant, the vehicle is registered to a Mr. Ethan Hayes, age 31. He's an accountant from the city. No priors, no history of drug use or mental health issues. That's him in the photo. So, where is he? Vance looked around the deserted woods, then back at the pristine interior. Someone abducted him, locked the car, and then, left his photo as a calling card? Ben stepped closer to the driver's seat, ignoring Vance's glare. He noticed something small tucked into the groove between the seat cushion and the backrest. He pulled out a single, stiff, white feather, roughly the length of his thumb. "Lieutenant, look at this. It's not a bird feather." It was impossibly white, almost glowing under the growing sunlight, and felt unnaturally rigid. Vance snatched it, examining it dismissively. "Probably flew in." "Carter, about your code 3. If the car was empty, what was moving inside?" Ben knew the only honest answer would sound insane. He recounted the low, rhythmic dragging, the subsequent stillness, and finally, the slow, silent opening of the window revealing the vast, black eye. He left out the radio whisper. Vance sighed heavily, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Carter, you're exhausted. You've been working too many graveyard shifts. We found a few tiny finger-like marks outside, and a car locked itself, which can happen with a faulty key fob. But an eyeball the size of a fist? We're dealing with facts here." As if to refute her claim, Marcus Cole's voice cut in from the trunk of the car, where he was examining the claw marks. "Lieutenant, the gouges are unique. They're not from a knife or a tool. They're definitely organic. And the pattern, it suggests 6 distinct points of pressure." Cole looked pale. "And there's this, sir." It was wedged into the brake light housing. Cole held up a small object. It was the little wooden spinning top. It was no longer brightly colored. It was uniformly black, as if charred, and incredibly cold to the touch. Vance looked from the spinning top to Ben's wide, fearful eyes, and then back to the inexplicable scratches on the car. The dismissive certainty in her face finally broke, replaced by a flicker of cold doubt. "Get the car loaded," she ordered sharply. "And Carter, you and Reyes are now primary on this case. Go home, get some sleep, and meet me at the precinct at 1800 hours. And bring your incident report. Detail everything." As the tow truck winch groaned and began pulling the sedan out of the woods, Ben glanced at the scene one last time. He saw Val nodding grimly at him, confirming they both knew this was no ordinary missing person. And from his cruiser's parked radio, which was currently turned off, Ben heard it again, the low, distorted whisper, cutting through the morning air, no static, just the voice. "Don't worry, officer. We just needed a place to start." Ben drove home through the quiet suburban streets, the morning rush hour yet to begin. The events at Oakhaven replayed constantly, the silent spinning top, the monstrous black eye, the impossible self-locking car, and the final, chilling whisper from his off radio. Lieutenant Vance might dismiss it as exhaustion, but Ben knew better. He knew fear. He parked his cruiser and walked up the front path to his small, 2-bedroom ranch. The relief of being home was immediate but fleeting. He knew he wouldn't sleep. He went straight to the kitchen, poured a large glass of water, and then retrieved his incident report from his briefcase. He sat at his dining table, determined to write down the facts before his memory could be twisted by doubt or disbelief. He was meticulously detailing the appearance of the black eye when his phone buzzed. It was a text from Val. "Val, forensics found something else in the sedan. I'll tell you later. But look up Oakhaven. Not the logging records. Look up the old Oakhaven Children's Home. Before '98. Ben quickly finished his entry about the eye, then turned on his laptop. He typed in Oakhaven Children's Home 1990s. The search results were sparse, mostly old digitized newspaper clippings. The home was shut down in 1998 due to lack of funding, following a mysterious outbreak of mass hysteria among the children in the early 90s. The clippings spoke of night terrors, sleepwalking, and children complaining that the night man was playing games with them. Ben scrolled further and found a blurry picture. It was a black and white photograph of the home's primary school class, taken in 1995. He recognized one face instantly. It was Ethan Hayes, the missing accountant, standing in the back row, looking slightly older than the other children. He was an alumnus of the place. He went back to where he grew up, Ben murmured, a fresh wave of dread washing over him. He was interrupted by a low, scraping sound coming from the small hallway closet near his front door. Ben froze, his heart seizing. He lived alone. He drew his sidearm, the familiar weight providing a fraction of comfort. He moved slowly, deliberately, toward the closet door, every muscle tense. "Police! I'm armed. Show yourself." Silence. Ben reached out and flung the closet door open. It was empty. Just coats, old boots, and a vacuum cleaner. He lowered his weapon, chastising himself. "You're hearing things, Carter." Vance was right. He turned to walk back to the dining table, and that's when he saw it. Resting neatly on the center of his clean wooden dining table, precisely where he had been working just a minute ago, was the children's picture of Ethan Hayes. The one he had just pulled up on his laptop screen. Ben stared at it, his mind reeling. He hadn't printed it. He hadn't touched it. It was a digital image. Yet, there it was, a physical, printed copy, still warm to the touch, resting on his table. And next to the photograph, lying on its side, was a child's brightly colored toy. A wooden spinning top. It was identical to the one found in the sedan, except this one was pristine, vibrant with color, and bore no charring. It couldn't be the same one. But how did it get inside his locked house? Ben snatched up the top, his fingers trembling. He spun around, searching the house frantically. Every window was locked, every door secured. He hadn't seen a soul. He felt the sudden, crushing realization that the thing inside the sedan, the movement that scraped and tapped, hadn't just found him at Oakhaven. It had followed him. He looked down at the spinning top in his hand. He gripped it tightly, his knuckles white. The sudden, loud, jarring ring of his landline phone, an old model he barely used, made him jump almost out of his skin. He lunged for it, needing a human voice. "Hello? Carter?" A long moment of silence passed. Then, a slow, deep breath, heavy with phlegm, filled the receiver. It wasn't a whisper. It was a labored, guttural voice, like gravel being ground together. "The game starts now, Ben." Then, the line went dead. Ben stared at the receiver. The voice hadn't sounded like a prank. It sounded ancient, and wrong. And it knew his name. He dropped the phone, grabbed his car keys, and sprinted out the front door, leaving the spinning top and the photo on his dining table. He couldn't stay there. He was going back to the only place he felt marginally safer, the precinct. Ben arrived at the precinct well before his scheduled 1800 meeting, his anxiety level spiking off the charts. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in 3 days, and the sight of the familiar, buzzing fluorescent lights was actually comforting compared to the silence of his own home. He found Sergeant Reyes in the deserted records room, hunched over a desktop monitor, a half-eaten container of cold Chinese takeout next to her. "Easy, Ben. You look like you sprinted here," Val said, not looking up. "Did you write the report?" Ben slammed his briefcase onto the table, pulling out the pristine wooden top and the warm photograph of Ethan Hayes. "Val, look at this. I found this on my dining table 20 minutes ago. My house was locked. And I got a call on my landline. A voice. It knew my name and said, 'The game starts now.'" Val finally looked up, her expression hardening immediately. She examined the top, then the photo. Her eyes went wide. "That's impossible, Ben. Vance would commit you." "I know. But I'm telling you, this case followed me home." "What did forensics find in the car?" Val leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Cole found something else in the sedan. Something under the carpeting of the trunk, near those claw marks. It's why I've been down here." She pulled a small, sealed evidence bag from her pocket. Inside was a tarnished silver locket. It was clearly antique, engraved with looping script that Ben couldn't quite decipher. "It's a memorial locket," Val explained. "Inside, there's a lock of hair and a faded inscription. The inscription is written in Latin. I ran it through an online translator. It says, 'Do not forget the first sacrifice.'" "First sacrifice?" Ben repeated, his blood running cold. "Who was this for?" Val typed a query into the records terminal, then pointed at the screen. "I cross-referenced the Oakhaven Children's Home records with all missing persons from 1990 to 1998. They were good at covering up the hysteria, but they weren't good at keeping accurate records." The screen displayed a police report from 1996. In 1996, a 7-year-old girl named Lila Jenkins disappeared from the Oakhaven home grounds. She was one of the children reportedly suffering from the night terrors. The report lists her as "ran away," but the case was never closed. Val zoomed in on the photo attached to the report. "Look at her face, Ben." "And look at this," Val said, producing a slightly clearer image of the locket. The script on the locket matched the name on the report, Lila J. "This locket belonged to Lila Jenkins," Ben whispered. "Ethan Hayes must have taken the car to Oakhaven to look for something connected to her. Why else would this locket be wedged under his trunk carpeting? And why would the thing in his car leave it, along with the spinning top, as a breadcrumb?" Val countered, running a hand through her hair. Ben pulled up the Oakhaven Children's Home blueprints on his laptop. The building was designed like a small, self-contained complex. "Val, the report said the children complained of the night man playing games. What if the night man was real, and what if he's tied to this location?" Ben traced the blueprint with his finger. "The schoolhouse, the dormitory, and here, this small, unmarked structure near the logging access road. It's listed as an old maintenance shed, the exact spot where Ethan Hayes' car was found." Val's radio on her hips suddenly chirped to life, not with a broadcast, but with a brief burst of static, followed by the faint sound of a child giggling, quickly cut off. Both officers froze. They looked at the radio, then at each other. Ben looked down at the spinning top on the table. "It's the dispatch," Ben said, his voice quiet. "The whispering dispatch. It's connected to this place, Val. It's using the dispatch channel to talk to us. Not just me anymore." "Okay, Carter," Val said, her skepticism finally replaced by chilling certainty. "You're not crazy. This is beyond missing persons. We need to go back to Oakhaven. But this time, we don't go alone, and we sure as hell don't go in uniform." She pointed back at the maintenance shed on the blueprint. "Ethan went there for a reason. Lila Jenkins' locket was found near there. That shed is the key. And before we go, we need to know what they were building there before 1998, because that shed is too big for a lawnmower." Ben and Val returned to the Oakhaven access road at 2,300 hours, both in plain clothes and driving Val's unmarked black SUV. They carried no patrol radios, only secure, encrypted cell phones, and flashlights with high-lumen tactical settings. They had also acquired 2 heavy-duty lockpicking sets and a small excavation kit, just in case. "The air is different here at night," Val murmured, gripping her flashlight. "Thicker. Like breathing heavy fog." "It knows we're here," Ben replied, his voice low. He kept his own fear tightly leashed, focusing only on the coordinates they'd pulled from the old blueprints. They navigated the overgrown path until they reached the structure marked as the old maintenance shed. It was a squat, concrete block building, listing slightly to one side, its corrugated metal door secured with a heavy, rusted padlock. "Too sturdy for a shed full of rakes," Ben observed. He took out the lockpicking set and worked quickly, his police training kicking in. A minute later, the lock clicked open. They pulled the heavy door inward. The stench that hit them was immediate and overwhelming, a mixture of mold, decay, and the same metallic, briny smell Ben had noticed in the mud near the sedan. They swept their lights across the interior. It was much larger than they had expected. The walls were lined with defunct shelving units, and the concrete floor was cracked and littered with old, rotting burlap sacks. In the center of the room, however, the floor was different. A circular patch, about 6 feet in diameter, was made of newer, darker concrete, clearly distinct from the rest of the floor. "Fresh cement?" Val whispered, stepping closer. "That area was patched recently. Maybe within the last year." Ben approached the patch. He ran his hand over the surface. It was smooth, but colder than the surrounding concrete. He shined his light across the surface and saw what looked like faint scrape marks, centered around the patch, similar to the ones on the back of Ethan Hayes' sedan. "This is what Ethan Hayes came back for," Ben stated, pulling a small, geological hammer from his bag. "Whatever they were trying to hide here, they hid it recently." He struck the patch once. The sound was not the solid thud of a concrete floor. It was a hollow, resonant boom. "It's hollow," Val confirmed. "There's a space underneath." They worked for 10 minutes, Ben using the hammer and Val using a small crowbar, chipping away at the newer concrete patch. The air grew thick with dust and the horrible, metallic scent intensified. Finally, Ben managed to pry a large chunk of the cement patch loose. He shone his flashlight into the hole. It was not a basement. It was a circular, stone-lined well, dropping straight down into inky blackness. "A well?" Val breathed. Why would a maintenance shed be built over a well? "Maybe it wasn't a well for water," Ben said, his voice grim. "Look at the sides." The stone lining was smooth near the top, but further down, the stones were coated with a dark, glistening film that reflected the light. It looked like ancient, dried oil, but Ben had a sickening feeling it was the same viscous substance he'd seen in the handprints. As they peered into the abyss, a new sound emerged from the depths, the faint, rhythmic sound of a child singing. The same nursery rhyme Ben had heard when he found the sedan. Round and round the garden went the little mouse. The sound was unnervingly clear, as if the singer was just feet away, yet it echoed from a deep, unseen chamber. Val gripped Ben's arm, her eyes wide with mounting terror. "That's not an echo, Ben. Something is down there, and it's communicating with us." Suddenly, the singing stopped. There was a moment of absolute, suffocating silence. Then, a splash. A loud, heavy plunk from the bottom of the shaft, followed by the sound of something large beginning to drag itself up the wet, stone wall. Ben's headlamp caught a fleeting glimpse of motion, a single, thin, white object rising slowly through the dark. It was the impossible, rigid white feather. It floated up past their faces, impossibly dry, and landed silently on the edge of the hole. Before either of them could react, the radio on Val's secure cell phone, which was off, completely off, let out a single, wet, choking gasp. And then the ancient, gravelly voice was back, loud enough to make the cement walls vibrate. "Found you, at the beginning." A massive tremor shook the maintenance shed. The surrounding old concrete floor began to crack violently. Ben and Val knew they had to get out, now. They had opened the door, and whatever was down there was coming up. The massive tremor nearly threw Ben and Val off their feet. The old maintenance shed groaned, and the ceiling began to shower them with concrete dust and decaying wood. Whatever was rising from the well was incredibly heavy. "Go! Now!" Ben yelled, grabbing Val's arm and hauling her toward the door. They scrambled out of the shed just as the central structure gave way. The ground beneath the hollowed area buckled, and the dark concrete patch collapsed inward with a deafening roar. The old metal roof of the shed peeled back like tinfoil, sucked into the vortex of the collapsing foundation. they flattened themselves against the overgrown brush, watching in horrified silence as the whole structure dissolved into a sinkhole of dust and debris, revealing the dark, yawning mouth of the well. The metallic, briny smell was now overwhelming, and the air temperature around the hole plummeted instantly. The whole thing, Val stammered, catching her breath. It was unstable. That thing wanted out. It's out now, Ben said, his eyes scanning the surrounding darkness. The chanting, the dragging, the gravelly voice, it had all stopped. The silence that followed was far worse than the noise. Ben looked back at the destroyed shed. Wait. The cement patch. Before it cracked, I saw something under the edges of the patch that hadn't fully cured. Ignoring Val's frantic warnings, Ben rushed back toward the edge of the sinkhole. He pointed his light at a section of the floor that hadn't fully collapsed. It was the original concrete foundation, now fractured, revealing something tucked into the break. They used the small trowel from their excavation kit to pry open the largest crack. Embedded firmly in the old foundation, cemented beneath the newly poured patch, was a small, brass plaque. Val carefully leveraged the plaque out. It was heavy, cold, and inscribed with text. "It's a dedication," Val whispered, reading the tarnished brass under the flashlight beam. The plaque read, "Dedication, the Oakhaven Foundation 1997 for the containment and nourishment of the host. This well is sealed to maintain the game. Do not forget the first sacrifice." The text repeated the Latin inscription from Lila Jenkins' locket exactly. The Oakhaven Foundation, they weren't building a well, Ben realized, his voice trembling. They were building a containment unit. They weren't fighting the night man, Val. They were feeding it. And the kids from the home? Lila Jenkins, Ethan Hayes. Val trailed off, connecting the horrifying dots. They were the nourishment. The mass hysteria was the host being fed. Suddenly, Ben's secured cell phone, sitting on the ground nearby, began to vibrate wildly. It was receiving a data burst, despite the remote location. Ben picked it up. A new message had appeared on the screen, sent from an unknown number. It wasn't text. It was a picture. The image was a dark, grainy photo taken inside a cramped space. In the center of the photo was a man, wide-eyed and terrified. It was Ethan Hayes. He was naked, his skin covered in the same dark, glistening substance Ben had seen on the well's stones. Ethan was huddled against a wall, but his mouth was unnaturally wide, stretched into a permanent, horrifying rictus. He was clutching something small and black to his chest. And in the background, out of focus but undeniably present, was a massive, impossibly pale form, with long, spidery limbs and multiple dark, glossy spheres that could only be eyes. Underneath the picture was a single, terrifying caption. "Thank you for unsealing the game. Your shift starts now." They had freed the host. And it had just claimed its first victim, the same man who had brought it to their attention. Ben looked from the phone, to the plaque in Val's hand, and then to the vast, dark sinkhole, now completely silent. The game had truly begun. Ben and Val sped away from the collapsing Oakhaven site, the brass plaque and the encrypted photo of Ethan Hayes their only tangible evidence. The reality of the host, a contained, living entity that was now free, was a chilling anchor to their fear. They drove straight back to the precinct, bypassing the main doors and taking their evidence directly to Detective Lieutenant Vance's closed office. Vance was furious that they had returned to the scene without authorization and without their patrol radios. "You two are lucky I don't write you up for insubordination," Vance hissed, pointing a finger at Ben. "And Carter, I hope you have a better explanation than ghost stories this time." Val slammed the brass plaque onto Vance's desk. "It's not a ghost story, Lieutenant. It's a containment failure. This plaque was found cemented into the foundation of that shed. Read the dedication." Vance picked up the plaque, her expression shifting from anger to genuine confusion as she read the Latin inscription and the word nourishment. Ben then produced his phone and showed her the terrifying, grainy image of Ethan Hayes and the massive, pale form. "This came to my phone seconds after the shed collapsed," Ben explained, his voice flat. "It's Ethan Hayes. And that is the host." Whatever the Oakhaven Foundation was doing, they were trapping something. "And we let it out." Vance stared at the image, her cynicism finally cracking under the weight of the inexplicable. This could be faked, Carter. A very elaborate hoax." "Look at his mouth, Lieutenant," Val urged, pointing to the horrifying rictus on Hayes' face. "That's not Photoshop. That's pure, primal terror." Before Vance could respond, the precinct intercom system, which ran on the same frequency as the main dispatch, suddenly blasted a distorted audio signal. It wasn't the gravelly voice, or the whisper. It was an echoing, high-pitched screech that vibrated through the floorboards. Every officer in the nearby squad room immediately covered their ears in pain. "What in God's name was that?" Vance gasped, shaken. The intercom then went silent, replaced by the low, distorted whisper that Ben knew all too well. "Found you, at your station." A patrol officer rushed into Vance's office, his face white with fear. "Lieutenant, the emergency dispatch board just went dark. Every unit radio just went offline. And the automated system is cycling through this weird, wet breathing sound." Vance pounded her fist on the desk. "Get IT down here. Now." Ben turned to the officer. "Officer, has anyone reported any recent disappearances? Anyone in the surrounding blocks who fits the profile of an alumnus?" "No, sir, but we just got an anonymous call," the officer replied, his voice strained. "A neighbor reported a disturbance 3 blocks away. A woman screaming, then silence. Address is 419 Maple Street." Ben and Val looked at each other. They didn't need the dispatch to tell them this was connected. "We take the call," Ben said, grabbing his jacket. "We're in plain clothes. Vance, you get the city records on the Oakhaven Foundation. Find out who ran it and what their containment was." Val and Ben raced out, driving toward Maple Street. As they approached the residential area, Ben noticed a terrifying anomaly. All the porch lights, street lamps, and even the traffic lights on the block they were entering had flickered off, plunging the area into oppressive blackness. When they arrived at 419 Maple Street, they found a small, single-story house sitting in total darkness. The front door was slightly ajar. They approached slowly, weapons drawn. Ben kicked the door open. The house was cold, quiet, and pitch black. They used their tactical lights to sweep the living room. Everything was neat, untouched, except for one thing: a child's brightly colored wooden top lay in the center of the rug, spinning. Not frantically, but slowly, hypnotically, and perfectly silently. Ben recognized the pattern immediately. It was the same rhythm as the one he found in his house. They followed the light trail to the master bedroom. It was empty. The bed was neatly made. But on the pillow, resting where the owner's head should have been, was a photograph. It was a faded graduation picture. The smiling woman in the cap and gown was Lila Jenkins, the child who disappeared from Oakhaven in 1996. She had never been found, yet here was proof she had grown up, only to be taken now. Lila Jenkins was the first sacrifice. And now, she was the second victim. Val pointed her light at the ceiling directly above the bed. Scratched deeply into the plaster were 6 distinct gouges, the same claw marks they had seen on the trunk of Ethan Hayes' sedan. Suddenly, Val's cell phone, resting on her belt, began to play an audio file, bypassing all security settings. It was the last sound recorded by Lila Jenkins' phone. It was a woman's terrified scream, abruptly cut off by a wet, scraping sound, and the low, gravelly voice, breathing heavily. "Now, your turn." The lights in the house flashed on, blindingly bright. And standing in the open bedroom doorway, silhouetted against the blinding light, was a tall, unnaturally thin figure with 6 long, spidery limbs, covered in the same glistening black substance. It was holding a police radio. It was the host. And it had been waiting for them. The sudden surge of light blinded Ben and Val for a critical second. When their eyes adjusted, they saw the host in terrifying detail. It was taller than a man, impossibly slender, with skin the color of bone and a torso that seemed to ripple beneath its surface. 6 long, jointless limbs ended in sharp, black points, the claws that had gouged the cars and walls. But the most horrifying detail was its head, a smooth, featureless skull, utterly devoid of eyes, nose, or mouth. The thing was holding Lila Jenkins' police radio, a standard-issue walkie-talkie, in one of its clawed hands. The gravelly voice of the host came not from its body, but booming from the tiny radio speaker. The containment failed. The game requires more players. The host dropped the radio. The thud was swallowed by the carpet. It moved with sickening speed, not running, but sliding across the floor. "Fire!" Ben yelled, emptying his magazine into the host's torso. Val immediately joined him, aiming for center mass. The bullets hit with wet smacks but had absolutely no effect. The pale flesh absorbed the rounds as if it were impacting dense rubber. The host didn't even flinch. No effect. "Retreat!" Val screamed. They scrambled backward into the hallway. The host pursued, its movements disturbingly fluid. As it lunged, one of its spidery limbs lashed out, tearing a deep groove across the drywall right beside Ben's head. They retreated to the living room, backing towards the still-ajar front door. Ben's mind raced, searching for anything that worked. Light? Fire? He remembered the host being confined in the darkness of the well. And he remembered the house lights suddenly flickering to blinding intensity just before the host appeared. "The lights!" Ben yelled. "It can't stand the bright light. It's standing in it now." Val retorted, frantically trying to reload her weapon. "No, look. It only appeared after the lights were fully on. It's playing with the light." Ben remembered the power surge and the darkness on the street. He looked up at the ceiling fan in the living room. It had a pull chain for the light. The host was closing the gap, its clawed limbs scraping a rhythmic tap-tap-tap on the wooden floor, the song of the spinning top. "Distraction!" Ben screamed, tossing the empty magazine at the host's face. As the host's torso tilted momentarily, Val grabbed a heavy ceramic vase from an end table and hurled it. It shattered harmlessly against the creature's chest. Ben lunged for the pull chain on the ceiling fan. His fingers wrapped around the chain, but before he could pull it, the host was upon him. A large, black claw clamped down on his shoulder. The pain was immediate and excruciating. Ben screamed, feeling the claw puncture his skin and dig toward the bone. He pulled the chain down with a desperate yank. Click! The bright, white light in the living room snapped off. The room was plunged into total darkness. The instant the light died, the claw released Ben. He heard a sickening, guttural hiss, the first purely organic sound from the creature. The host wasn't gone, but its movement had changed. It was slower, clumsy, dragging itself across the floor with agonizing slowness. The darkness is where it's strong. But the light, the absence of light, is agonizing. Val realized, shining her tactical light, a concentrated, powerful beam, directly into the space where the host had been. The concentrated beam hit the featureless skull. The host didn't disintegrate, but it recoiled violently, letting out another high-pitched screech through the silenced house. It was a cry of pain. Flashlights! Val yelled. It doesn't like intense, focused light. Keep the beam steady. They simultaneously locked their high-lumen tactical lights onto the creature. Cornered by the beams, the host became a frantic, writhing mass of pale limbs, trying desperately to escape the illumination. It dragged itself toward the kitchen, away from the focused light, and then, with a speed that defied its clumsy movements, it lunged at the wall near the back door. The pale flesh seemed to spread, flattening against the plaster, and then, impossibly, it began to melt into the wall, flowing like thick white oil. In seconds, the host was gone, leaving only the sound of its heavy, wet breathing echoing faintly from the drywall, receding into the structure of the house. Ben clutched his bleeding shoulder. It's using the house to escape, the structure is a vessel for it. Val rushed to his side, examining the wound. 3 deep, parallel puncture marks. We have to get out of here, now. It's retreating to reorganize. But it knows where we are. And it knows the department frequency. As they stepped out onto the pitch-black porch, Ben looked down the street. The lights were still out. But coming from the corner of the block, weaving through the suburban shadows, was the rhythmic, high-pitched tap-tap-tap of a wooden top spinning on the asphalt. The game wasn't over. It had just changed locations. Ben, with his freshly bandaged shoulder, and Val returned to the precinct, their adrenaline replaced by a cold, desperate exhaustion. They burst back into Lieutenant Vance's office. "Lieutenant, you need to hear us now. We found Lila Jenkins. Or what was left of her," Ben stated, his voice raw. He recounted the sequence of events at Maple Street, the silent, spinning top, the terrifying image of the host, the claw marks, and the forced audio recording on Val's phone. Vance was shaken by their injuries and frantic state, but the lack of a body and the sheer impossibility of the creature they described made her hesitant. "Carter, Val. I believe something happened. But a monster that melts into walls? A creature that feeds on former orphans? This is not something the police department can handle," Vance said, rubbing her temples. "We need concrete, physical evidence that isn't a blurry photo or a piece of engraved brass." The host disabled the entire department radio system, Lieutenant. It spoke through the intercom. Val argued, gesturing toward the silent, ominous device. Before the argument could escalate, the phone on Vance's desk rang. She snatched it up. "Vance." "Yes, he's here." "What?" "Slow down, Marcus." Vance's eyes widened as she listened to the forensics tech, Marcus Cole, on the other end. She hung up slowly, her hand trembling. That was Marcus. He was just about to run the final trace on the viscous substance we found on the mud and on the Oakhaven well stones. He was in the secured forensics lab. He was the only one with physical access to the evidence. "What happened?" Ben asked, stepping closer. "Marcus is gone," Vance whispered, her face pale. "His lab was breached. The evidence is gone. And they found this on his workstation." Vance pulled a small, laminated paper from her pocket. It was a copy of the final lab inventory sheet. Scrawled across the top, in a child's messy cursive handwriting using a thick, dark substance, was a single word, "player." "It's targeting anyone who was a part of its release, or anyone who knows too much," Val realized, looking at Ben. Ethan Hayes, Lila Jenkins, Marcus Cole, they all touched the evidence or the history. "Vance, you have to lock down the department." "We are all targets," Ben insisted. "Lock down for what, Carter? For a creature that uses the radio waves and melts through walls? I can't call in the FBI or Homeland Security with this story." Suddenly, the lights in Vance's office began to flicker rapidly, plunging them into a strobe-like effect. The door to her office slammed shut and locked with a metallic clang. From the center of the room, near the ceiling corner, the low, chilling whisper returned. Don't call your friends. Your captain is playing. Vance looked up, terrified. The captain? Captain Reynolds? Ben grabbed Val, pushing her behind Vance's solid oak desk. The focused light. Where's your flashlight, Lieutenant? Vance fumbled frantically in her desk drawer, pulling out a small emergency flashlight. She clicked it on, casting a weak, yellow beam. The light stopped flickering. The power stabilized, but the room was still locked. The whispering was gone. What did it mean, your captain is playing? Val demanded. Ben's blood ran cold as he connected the dots. The Oakhaven Foundation plaque was dated 1997. Captain Reynolds, their department head, was an old-school cop who had been with the force for over 30 years. He would have been a high-ranking officer in the mid-90s, when Oakhaven was shut down. The Oakhaven Foundation, Ben realized. It wasn't just some religious cult. It was sanctioned, probably by high-ranking people trying to contain this thing. Reynolds knew about the host, and he kept the secret. He grabbed Vance's locked phone and dialed Val's secured number, speaking quickly. Val, pull up Captain Reynolds' personnel file. Look for anything tied to Oakhaven, 1996 to 1998. Val quickly accessed the secured database on her phone. Her eyes scanned the data. Ben Reynolds took a medical leave of absence for 6 months in late 1997, Val reported, her voice hushed. The dates align perfectly with the plaque's dedication. A fresh wave of static erupted from Vance's secured phone line. It wasn't the whisper this time. It was the sound of a struggle. Shuffling, a guttural gasp, and then, the familiar, ancient voice. The containment failed because of the players. Now the host consumes the truth. The transmission ended with a sharp crack that sounded like bone breaking. That was Reynolds, Ben stated grimly. The host is cleaning house. It's eliminating anyone who was involved in its capture. He looked at Vance, who was now visibly distraught, the fear overriding her authority. Lieutenant, we have the only hard evidence of the host's weakness, focused light and the Oakhaven Foundation's history. We need to find where Captain Reynolds kept his personal files. He must have documents that explain the containment and the nourishment. That's the only way we stop it. As if in agreement, the front screen of Vance's office computer suddenly flickered on, showing a single, stark image, the faded 1995 class picture of the Oakhaven Children's Home. A red circle had been drawn digitally around the face of Ethan Hayes. And next to it, a red arrow pointing directly at a smiling, younger man in the photo, Captain Reynolds, posing with the children. The host was leaving them clues, telling them who was involved. The game was forcing them to uncover the truth. The computer screen with Captain Reynolds' smiling face beside the doomed children of Oakhaven was the confirmation Vance needed. The veil of official skepticism was finally lifted. His office, Vance breathed, pointing to the closed door. Reynolds' personal files. They're locked tighter than a bank vault, but if anyone knows how to get in, it's you two. Ben and Val needed no further urging. They located the main access to Reynolds' wing. It was a restricted, soundproof area, reinforcing the captain's need for secrecy. They used a specialized kinetic breaching tool to snap the reinforced lock on Reynolds' door. Inside, the office was neat, sterile, and cold. Ben immediately went to the wall safe hidden behind a framed commendation plaque. Val, watch the door and the windows. That thing moves through structure, Ben commanded, already working on the combination. Val's high-lumen light swept the room. The silence is the worst part. It's not whispering. It's waiting. Ben found a complex safe combination scribbled on the back of a decade-old Christmas card inside Reynolds' desk. He worked the dial precisely, and with a soft click, the safe opened. Inside, there wasn't money or gold, but a thick, leather-bound journal and a stack of heavily redacted police documents dated 1997. Ben pulled out the journal first. The entries were written in Reynolds' neat, authoritative handwriting. The final entry, dated 2 days ago, was scrawled hastily. "I saw the news report. The car." Hayes went back. The containment failed the second he brought the top back to the well. "We shouldn't have used the children for the game. I thought the host was dormant. I was wrong. The game requires the original players to release it, and it will pursue the players until the host is fed one last time. It cannot be stopped by bullets. Only by completing the ritual." Ben quickly skimmed the documents. The Oakhaven Foundation was a covert government project designed to contain the host, an ancient, predatory entity discovered during logging operations. The containment was the well. The nourishment was psychological terror and eventual consumption. "Val. The host is playing a ritual," Ben exclaimed, summarizing the journal. "It pursues the players, anyone connected to the containment, until it is fed one last time. We are now players." Val pointed at a smaller compartment in the safe. "There's something else in here." Ben pulled out a small, heavy object wrapped in oilcloth. It was a police radio, not a modern walkie-talkie, but an old, black and silver handset from the 1990s. It looked almost identical to the one the host was seen holding. Attached to the handset was a small, laminated instruction card. It was titled, Protocol 7, The Host's Rules. Ben read the rules out loud, his voice tight. Rule 1, the host is physically invulnerable to conventional force. Rule 2, the host must be contained within a vessel. Rule 3, the host communicates through the dispatch frequency, using fear to locate and confuse targets. Rule 4, the feeding is completed when the host consumes a player in the presence of the first sacrifice. Rule 5, the host's ability to communicate, move, and materialize is crippled by focused illumination and can only be permanently immobilized if trapped in a containment loop broadcasting a counterfrequency. A counterfrequency, Val repeated, her mind racing. It uses the dispatch frequency, the B-flat hum we hear. The counter must be a specific frequency to jam it and lure it back to the well. And look at this radio, Ben said, examining the old handset. It's custom built. It has a dial labeled counter. It was built to broadcast the containment loop. Suddenly, the lights in Reynolds' office began to flicker rapidly, signaling the host's approach. The gravelly voice boomed directly from the old radio in Ben's hand, cutting through all normal function. The ritual is almost complete. The first sacrifice is with me. The players must finish the game. The sound of massive, scraping claws began to echo from the ventilation shaft above them. It's here, Val said, raising her tactical light. It knows we have the radio. It wants us to use it, Ben realized, clutching the old handset. It wants to be contained, not because it can be stopped, but because that's the only way it completes the feeding. It needs to be in a loop with a player to consume them. Vance, who had been listening in horrified silence, pointed at the documents. The old Oakhaven site. That's the only original containment vessel. You have to go back. Ben looked at the radio, then at Val. We have to broadcast the counter frequency at the well to trap it, but according to Rule 4, it needs the first sacrifice, Lila Jenkins, to complete the feeding. It's not going to feed on Lila Jenkins, Ben, Val said, her eyes fixed on the entrance. It's using her as bait. It will feed on one of us, the players. We have to lure it back to the well, activate the loop, and use the focused light to keep it from taking all of us. We go back to Oakhaven, Ben confirmed, securing the radio and the journal. One last dispatch. They sprinted out of the office just as the ventilation shaft burst open, revealing the massive, pale, clawed foot of the host descending into the office. The creature had followed the trail of truth, and now it was closing in for the final play. Ben and Val raced through the city streets, heading back to the nightmare of Oakhaven. Lieutenant Vance, confined to the precinct, coordinated the minimal backup she could muster, 2 unmarked units equipped with high-powered searchlights, instructed only to illuminate the collapsed shed area from a distance. As they drove, the old police radio handset, the counter-frequency device, hissed with static. Ben carefully turned the dial to the counter position, but didn't push the broadcast button. "It knows we're coming," Val muttered, gripping the steering wheel. "It's been guiding us this whole time." "It thinks we're playing its game, Val," Ben countered, his face set. "We're going to play a different one." They arrived at the collapsed maintenance shed. The surrounding woods were eerily silent. In the distance, the powerful searchlights from the backup units flickered on, bathing the sinkhole in a blinding, concentrated beam. Ben took the old radio and walked to the edge of the pit. Val remained near the SUV, holding her tactical light and a high-powered flare gun. Dispatched to host, Ben spoke into the old, custom-built radio, his voice shaking but clear. "The players have returned. The containment loop is ready." The silence lasted for a tense minute. Then, from the blackness of the pit, the gravelly voice boomed from the radio in Ben's hand. "The first sacrifice is present. Proceed with the ritual." Ben didn't hesitate. He slammed the broadcast button on the counter-frequency device. A high-pitched, warbling tone, sickeningly loud, immediately erupted from the radio, saturating the immediate area. It was the containment loop, a piercing, electronic shriek designed to cripple the host's sensory and movement capabilities. From the depths of the well, there was a shriek, not the gravelly voice, but a raw, animalistic cry of agony. The dark, glistening substance that coated the stones began to bubble and steam under the onslaught of the sound and the distant searchlights. Ben shone his tactical light into the pit, keeping the beam steady. He saw the host. It was a massive, pale thing, curled in on itself, thrashing wildly against the sonic attack. And clutched within its spidery limbs, was a figure, Lila Jenkins. She was alive, but bound and covered in the dark, viscous substance. She was the bait, the focal point for the feeding ritual. "Val, the flare. Blind it." Val fired the flare gun. The projectile shot into the air and burst, showering the sinkhole with a dazzling, intense magnesium light. The combined light, flare and searchlights, was too much. The host let out a final, ear-splitting screech, its body shuddering violently. It recoiled and flung Lila Jenkins free. She tumbled onto the edge of the pit, unconscious but alive. Ben rushed forward, dragging Lila away from the edge. That's when the host acted. Its spidery limbs extended, not toward Lila, but toward Ben. The game requires the player. A claw wrapped around Ben's ankle, pulling him with impossible force toward the collapsing edge. He struggled, dropping the active radio, which was still screaming the counter-frequency. Val ran, firing her remaining bullets into the ground near the host's torso, forcing it to briefly retract some of its limbs. She grabbed Ben's hand, pulling against the creature's massive strength. "Let go, Ben. We have to seal it," Val yelled, straining. Ben looked at the terrifying thing, its eyeless face thrashing wildly under the light. He knew the ritual needed a final sacrifice, a player, to be consumed to reset the containment loop. And he knew the host would just chase Val next. He reached up, grabbed Val's collar, and with a desperate surge of strength, shoved her backward, away from the pit. "Go, Val. Seal it." Val tumbled away, safe. She watched in paralyzing horror as the host's main limbs wrapped around Ben and dragged him over the edge. Before he disappeared, Ben looked at the old radio, still broadcasting the agonizing frequency. He used his last moment of consciousness to kick the radio with his boot, sending it tumbling deep into the pit. The moment the radio hit the bottom, the counter-frequency shriek reached its intended target, the heart of the host. The screaming stopped. The ground shuddered once more, violently. The host, with Ben Carter clutched in its embrace, collapsed inward. The black, viscous fluid on the stones began to dry instantly, hardening into a thick, unbreakable shell. Val scrambled to the edge. The sinkhole was silent, stable, and completely sealed. The only evidence left was the powerful counter-frequency, now trapped beneath the earth, ensuring the host remained immobilized. Val staggered back, grabbing the traumatized Lila Jenkins. She looked at the sealed earth, knowing that Ben Carter, the cop who always did things by the book, had paid the final price to end the most impossible case. Epilogue. 3 weeks later, the official report listed Officer Ben Carter as missing, presumed deceased, in a structural collapse during an unauthorized investigation. The department buried the Oakhaven files and the brass plaque. The old frequency B-flat hum returned to the dispatch channels, but the low,